All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. Welcome to the 2023 budget consultation meeting for Ashburnham Ward. Today we're going to run through a welcome from the Finance Chair and Vice Chair, Councillor Keith Riel and Councillor Gary Baldwin, followed by a brief presentation from the city's finance team on the 2023 budget process, and then we'll open it up for opportunities for questions, comments about the city's budget for anyone who's dropping in today. Just a few items before we get started. Please stay muted and keep your camera off until you're invited to speak. To ask a question or share a comment, please use the raise hand feature. If you're joining on your computer, the raise hand feature is at the top. There's a show reaction icon with the face with the hand next to it. And if you click on that, the menu that appears, click on the raise hand icon. And on the Teams mobile app or smartphone app, you will find the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that one, you'll see the raise hand. For anyone phoning in, you can use the *5 to raise and lower your hand. Please remember to lower your hand after you've shared a comment or question, and we will try to call on people to share their questions or comments in the order that hands have been raised. We'd ask that you please keep your questions or comments to 2 minutes or less. You can also ask a question in the chat window. We'll be monitoring the chat window, and a moderator may read the questions if time allows, or the questions will be shared with council members and the city's finance team following the meeting. To turn on live captions during the meeting, click the 3 dots icon at the top of your screen for people on a computer, or at the bottom of your screen if you're joining by the Teams app or on a smartphone, and then you select turn on live captions. We'll be posting common questions and answers on the city's budget engagement page at connectptbo.ca/2023 budget following the meeting. And this meeting is being recorded. The recording of the presentation will be posted at connectptbo.ca/2023 budget. And just one last point, the budget survey is available in paper copy at City Hall or online at connectptbo.ca/2023 budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Councillor Keith Riel.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Thank you for joining us today for the budget consultation meeting. This is the start of the budget process. Before the city starts putting together the recommendation draft budget for next year, we meet with residents to talk about investments in services and infrastructure. Council and city staff consider the comments from residents alongside with various financial pressures, opportunities, and legislated service levels before setting the guidelines for drafting next year's budget. These meetings are one way of residents can interact with council members and city staff. You can also call or email your ward councillors. And there is a survey that's available in paper copy and paper copies at City Hall or online at connectpeterborough.ca/2023 budget. On the city budget's engagement page at connectpeterborough.ca, you will find information on the budget process and the previous budget books. After this series of more informal public budget meetings, there will be a formal public meeting with City Council on June the 22nd to hear from the community before Council considers setting the guidelines for the draft 2023 budget. The draft 2023 budget is expected to be posted for public review in early December. Then there will be more opportunity for residents to share their ideas and comments before Council reviews the budget documents and considers approving the financial plan in late January 2023. Before we ask the City Finance team to give a brief presentation, I'd like to thank Councillor Gary Baldwin, Council's Vice Chair of Finance as well, and I don't see any other the mayor or any of the council members. We would have them here. I don't see them here. So I will turn it over to my finance vice chair, Gary Baldwin, to say a few words. Gary, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with everyone this evening. Those who may be joining us live here, and those who will be perhaps looking at the replay of this at a future date. I want to take the opportunity to thank the finance team, Mr. Freeman and Yvette Poplinski, for assisting with the information this evening. I want to also take this opportunity, Mr. Chair, to thank Brendan Wedley and Sharon Hayton for the communications team and setting up and moderating this evening. Very much looking forward to hearing from the community as we begin upon the process of setting a budget guideline for Council's consideration. We have 4 other consultation meetings after this evening, and while they're set up in a ward-by-ward basis, they're open to the public, and if you can't make a budget opportunity to engage this evening, certainly take advantage of the other 4 opportunities. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
And with that, I invite Richard Freeman, the Commissioner of Corporate and Legislative Service, to kick us off with some information on the city's annual budget. Richard, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity this evening to talk about our 2023 budget. It's hard to believe that we're kicking it off already, and looking forward to the discussions this evening. I'm just going to take a moment and share my screen, and perhaps you could let me know when you're able to see it.
There, it's up there now, Richard.
All right, thank you. So I have a few slides, just a handful of slides that I want to go through this evening, just to kind of help give some context to the city's budget process and what's included in the budget and where to find information about it. So I'm going to start by a number of key dates for engagement with the budget process, and we're starting this evening with our virtual drop-in with this ward meeting in Ashburnham. And as you can see on the screen here, there's a number of opportunities and for participation in the budget throughout the entire process. And of course, after we've heard from the public throughout the spring and summer, staff will begin to develop the draft 2023 budget. Finance Committee will review and approve the budget guideline in June. We'll give a preliminary guideline report, and then once again invite the public to weigh in on the preliminary guideline that is presented. And then we're hoping that Council will establish in July the 2023 budget guideline. In the fall, of course, staff will finalize the draft budget, and we'll be presenting to the Finance Committee on December 5th later this year. And we're hoping and anticipating that Finance Committee budget deliberations will be held in January of 2023, and with an approval of the 2023 budget late in January. For those who may not be familiar with the city's budget process and where the city gets its money, I just want to take a moment here and just share with you some of the sources of revenues that the city uses each year. And you can see on the slide here this evening all the pieces of the pie, and I've separated them into various categories of revenue. Together, they amount to almost $300 million, but $298.2 million in the 2022 budget. And you can certainly see on the left side here, property taxes account for a fairly significant portion of the city's overall budget revenues at 49%. So certainly, property taxation is a large piece of the city's budget. But we have a number of other sources of revenue as well, such as grants from the provincial and federal governments, and such as federal gas tax and provincial gas tax. And in fact, you can see at about this 2 o'clock position up here. There's the 2022 budget, I believe, included over $60 million of provincial grants. And certainly, if you look down to at the bottom of the pie chart in that 6 o'clock position, other fees and service charges also account for a substantial portion of the city's budget. Of course, there's a number of areas where those funds go, and I just want to take a moment and show you where the tax dollars are spent, and the various how the budget is divided up at a fairly high level. Of course, much of the spending is for legislative requirements and provincial program delivery and essential services. And certainly the revenues that I shared a moment ago on the last screen are used to fund numerous costs, operating costs such as heat and electricity, and maintenance costs across, of course, all city facilities. Obviously, wages and for staff and in the delivery of services and programs like recreation and social services, and everything from garbage collection to plowing roads and sidewalks, transit drivers, police and fire, and so on. The city's budget is divided up into a number of departmental areas, and I just want to take a moment and speak briefly about them. And I'm going to start at kind of that 1 o'clock position here. You can see the Chief Administrative Officer department, and that includes, of course, the Communications Division, Fire Services, Emergency Management. We have the Corporate and Legislative Services, which really provides services a lot to both internal and external customers. We have the Clerk's Office, Human Resources, Legal Services, Financial Services, including the Tax Office, Facilities Management and Planning, and Information Technology. Then at about the 3 o'clock position, we have the Infrastructure and Planning Services, which really includes engineering and construction, public works, waste management, the airport, transit, planning, and building inspection. And then coming around at the bottom of the pie here, we have the community services area, which includes social services, arenas and recreation, art gallery, the museum, the library, and so on. We have a number of external agencies that we fund, and those include police services, public health, economic development, Fairhaven, paramedics, Humane Society, and the business improvement area, just to name a few of them. This next pie chart on your screen captures, in the 2022 budget, what does the capital program look like, and how did we spend the dollars for infrastructure? And you can certainly see that a significant portion of the capital budget was directed towards infrastructure planning services, and that accounted for over $60 million in the 2022 budget. So a huge focus on roads and bridge construction, storm and sanitary sewer networks, and the purchase of major pieces of equipment. Corporate and legislative services, you can see on the right-hand side of the pie chart, in that 2 and 3 o'clock position, includes investments in city facilities and various amenities throughout the community. Certainly, the CAO's division includes investments in major pieces of equipment like fire vehicles and so on. Already in the 2023 budget, as we turn our minds to this upcoming budget year, there's a number of considerations that we're making. Obviously, we want to hear about what are the priorities in the community, and we want to combine those with, of course, our legislative program requirements, the demands for services and infrastructure within the community. And of course, at the end of the day, we're going to have to make decisions about how we balance those wants and needs with the funding and that's available in our community. And already, as we contemplate the 2023 budget, we know that there's a number of impacts that will be coming down the pipe, and I just want to talk briefly about a couple of them. First, of course, is our investing in infrastructure. We have a capital financing policy at the city that allows for a maximum increase of our all-inclusive rate of up to 1% to support our capital program, and that has been central in terms of providing the financial resources we need to help repair and refurbish the city's infrastructure. Certainly, as we contemplate 2023, staff are hopefully going to be able to make a recommendation that we at least increase it by 0.5% to help address those needs. And certainly we'll be monitoring that amount, and we'll be trying to direct as much as we can into investing in infrastructure in the community. The next one I think is familiar to many of us here this evening. And as we go to the pump and fill up our vehicles, of course, we're impacted by what's happening at the in the worldwide markets in terms of fuel prices. And in 2023, as we consider what does that mean for the city, we're looking at a budget increase of, we think, about $1 million. And to put that into some context, because it's hard to get our heads around that sort of impact, but really for every penny of increase at the pump, that's about $30,000 to the city of Peterborough. So fairly substantial in terms of financial impacts of what we're seeing at the pump for our fuel needs. And the last one I'm going to mention this evening, and of course, these are only three that I'm focusing in on here this evening. There's a number of other ones that we perhaps are looking at closely, but certainly these three are kind of bubbling up to the top. And the last one here this evening is insurance costs, and we all know what's happening with insurance industry and hardening of the insurance markets. In the last 2 years, actually, in the city's budget, we've experienced about a 76% increase in our insurance premiums. And it's quite possible that there is going to be another increase in 2023, possibly about 20%. We're anticipating, that equates to about $465,000 for the city. We try to include as much information as we can on the city's website. And these last few slides, I just want to direct you to Peterborough Connect and what's some of the budget information that is available there on the city's website. There's a wealth of information, everything from where does your tax dollars go and where does the city get its money. Some of the things I've talked about, you can look at some of the budget books in previous years and just to avail yourself with the wealth of information that's available. We try to bring it down the budget into amounts that folks can understand and the services and programs that are delivered in the community. And so we take a typical homeowner and what does that mean for them, and so we try to indicate to that property homeowner, what does it mean for when they pay their tax bill? How does that translate into services that are provided in the community? So that sort of information is available on the city's website. Certainly don't forget to take a moment and fill out the budget survey. It's available online now, and we're hoping to have a great response from the community this year. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over, I believe, to Brendan, and I want to thank everyone for participating in the budget session here this evening.
Thanks, Richard. And I'll just bring back up my slides here. And at this point, we will open it up to any questions. Oh, I see Councillor Baldwin has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Freeman for the overview there. I think it was very well done. And I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if I might ask our communications staff, because the last thing that Richard had spoken about was the survey. I've had one question that's come to me, Brendan and Sharon, is that they're wondering how the results of the survey are compiled, and when will the results of the survey be shared with the public? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Baldwin. The results are summarized in this year. They'll be summarized in a kind of a one-page what we heard report and rolled up, but also contribute to Mr. Freeman's report to council on the budget guideline when that goes to council.
Thank you very much.
At this point, we just look to see if there's any questions or comments from any of our guests today. So. See no comments or questions right now. Oh, Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if someone wanted to wade in. Brendan, another question I had, and I think I can direct this through Councillor Reel to Mr. Freeman. Richard, we're seeing a lot of construction in the city right now, and there are many people that go by, and I've spoken to a few of them as I do some research at the library, and they're asking me about a project like that. You know, how can the city possibly do a project like that, you know, each year? And I was talking to them a little bit about pre-commitments that council makes to take on a large project such as that. I'm just wondering if you might be able to provide a little more detail about how council takes on large projects like that and how councils consider pre-commitments to get a big job like that done.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. It's a great question, and certainly as you alluded to the fact, you know, for a significant capital project, you know, we are often in the planning stages for quite some time. We try to plan well in advance, and oftentimes that means you know, doing the requisite studies, doing our homework, you know, ensuring that we're leveraging as much external funding as we can, and whether that perhaps might be some grant funding or from senior levels of government. Perhaps that's funding from development charges that's happening with growth in our community. We want to make sure that we plan well in advance to be able to leverage those sorts of funding that's available. You alluded to pre-commitments, and oftentimes as we get these major projects underway, you know, it involves a commitment. You know, at some point the decision needs to be made to move forward, and you know, it allows the contracts, the tenders to be let out in the community, and us to secure the services of the contractor, and however, what we try to do then is to finance the cost over a number of budget years, so that helps to spread out the cost, and certainly then, you know, that if we're not biting it all off in one budget year, you know, that allows us to move forward. So hopefully that answers your question there, Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah, it does, Richard. The other large project that I've been asked about is, and I know I see Councillor Real with his hand up, the other major project that might be top of mind for the residents of Peterborough would be the new twin pad and aquatic center. We've seen quite an escalation in the cost of that project from when we first envisioned it. So what you've described again would be a project where it's going to require multi-year funding, and it would be very similar to the Bethune Street project that we're doing now. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You are correct there, and you know, we're financing it over a number of years, and and we are trying to leverage as much external funding as we can and spread out that cost. So absolutely.
Thanks again, Richard.
Just piggybacking off of Councillor Baldwin's question, I had a constituent today asked me about the roads and why the roads weren't being fixed. And certainly, Richard, I think you can probably weigh in on this here. It kind of piggybacks on what Councillor Baldwin was asking about capital projects and trying to get as much stuff done in the city of Peterborough. So any comments on that?
Mr. Chairman, as you know from past capital budgets, we try to put as much investment as we can into our roads and road infrastructure, and certainly preventative maintenance like pavement preservation and ensuring that we're taking care of our road networks and trying to do the necessary refurbishments at the correct time through our asset management planning. I mean, those are all kind of key things that inputs into the decision making, and certainly to your comment, the city does have a fairly extensive road network. We'd love to get out more of them, and we'd love to do more of them. We do have a condition index on I believe most of our road network areas, and we try to prioritize them and balance the condition with the funding that's available. So certainly would like to do more, and I know that this coming construction season here that's going to be hopefully coming shortly, we'll be out and doing more refurbishments and road construction to make sure that the assets are in good shape.
The original question I was going to ask you before I morphed into that was, had a couple of people this week asking me how important these budget meetings are, and really are they taken seriously as we compile the information. So I give them the best answer that I could, but perhaps you could give them a better answer than I could of how important these budget meetings are, and for transparency, but also getting their ideas about the budget. This isn't just the council's budget. This is the citizens of Peterborough budget. So could you elaborate on that, Richard?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the input that we receive during our budget consultations is extremely important, and we take that input and of course use it into the decision making at city. Among staff, we want to hear what's important to the community. That information is reported out to council. When staff are bringing forward the budget, we're putting our best foot forward from what we've heard. Obviously, it's a draft budget. Council then takes that information, weighs in, decides whether they agree with it or not, or how do they want to change the priorities that from what they've heard in the community. So yeah, it's extremely important to hear the feedback.
I see Gary has his hand up. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And just want to switch gears, if I could, a little bit, Richard. I had a constituent ask me this morning about why this city has so much money in the budget books or in their bank accounts with respect to reserves. And I tried to liken that on a day-to-day basis of like a kind of an emergency fund at home. You have all of a sudden you have a pipe that breaks or something, and you don't have enough money to cover the cost for insurance. It's nice to have a little bit of a contingency fund there to fall back upon when or if a disaster of some sort occurs like that. Now, I know in our budgeting process, we have a number of reserve funds with specific purposes. In other words, we would put money into those reserve funds, but they need to be spent in a particular way. Just wondering if you could just give a brief comment on the need and why the use of reserves, or why we have that reserve process involved for the city. I know we're kind of buying equipment now to make infrastructure and road improvements and things like that, but the equipment that we're using today has a lifespan itself, and we have to replace that. I suspect that probably some of the reserve is for the replacement of equipment, but there's more to it than that. I'm just wondering if you might take a couple of minutes and just talk a little bit about the city's use of reserves.
Yeah, no, for sure. And certainly, you know, depending upon when we report out to council, you know, the amount that we hold in reserves does fluctuate. So I guess a couple of things come to mind, councillors, as we're talking about reserves, and you hit on a key one. Obviously, is setting aside monies, you know, methodically in a measured approach, a little bit at a time, setting that aside so that when we have those big you know, capital costs, whether it's a key piece of equipment, very specialized equipment, if it's a fire truck, a fire pumper, for instance, or a garbage truck, or, you know, some of the vehicles that you see on city streets and you know, routinely, those are very specialized pieces of equipment, very expensive. And so it's incumbent upon us to set aside monies as we can, and so that when we incur that significant cost, then we can turn to the reserve, pull out the monies into the reserve to pay the invoice, to pay for that piece of equipment, and we've by setting aside the smaller pieces of funding, we haven't then asked the taxpayer to fund that cost all in one foul swoop. So we spread out the cost over time, and just did that financial planning up front. So it certainly is a key piece of our capital financing. We pull into our capital budget millions of dollars out of reserves each year, and that is a critical piece of capital financing. Certainly another one, and I'll just mention this one, is, you know, we have a number of tax due dates throughout the year. So the property homeowner pays their property taxes in installments. And in fact, we just had one here today at City Hall. You know, I was here, I've seen constituents coming in to pay for their taxes, you know, on March 31st. Well, the last one we had was at the end of September last year. So we had to go from the end of September last year until the end of March, you know, 2022. That's a long stretch. And so we needed the money set aside in reserve to simply pay for the ongoing operating costs to run the city. And so it helps with that cash flow, you know, to keep us, the business of the city functioning. So a couple of key things for why we need reserves.
Richard, I have a comment. I was on a TV program last week, and they were talking about the budget, and certainly reminded them this is a $300 million business. This is, you know, this is like a medium-sized corporation. And I said, you know, before we even start, we have an obligation to our over 1,000 employees for wages and benefits. Can you, when there's all these asks for people wanting things done, whether it's roads, an arena, a library, a new fire hall, a new police station, all of this here stuff. I know you broke it down a bit on your pie chart, but maybe you could drill down a little bit about exactly where we stand with just paying our employees before we even, you know, that's an expense we have to, that's an overhead cost right off the bat. So what is the workable number for us to do anything of the asks that keep coming in?
Yeah, no, you're certainly hitting on a key area of cost within our operating budget. And if I was looking at the cost, you know, the funds that we direct towards our human resources, so salaries and benefits, including, you know, the overheads associated with those, you know, it's going to be in excess of $80 million a year, probably. Now, you have to appreciate the fact that, you know, during the year the city has, you know, over 1,000 employees. That number would not encompass police services, which is, you know, very much focused upon, you know, their investments in salaries, staff salaries, and officers on the street. That's a significant cost for them. And so, yeah, so all of those costs, you know, are for well, there's a lot of specialized, I mentioned police services, but we have a lot of specialized staff in terms of fire services, highly certified staff in various places throughout the organization. So all of that does come at a cost, and much of it is for legislated and mandated services that we must provide. So hopefully that sheds a little bit more light on it.
I see Councillor Baldwin has his hand up, so go ahead, Gary.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Again, if there's anybody from the public again that would like to chime in here, by all means. But I think it's a good opportunity for yourself, Councillor Riel, and myself to work with staff this evening to educate the public as well, and to educate ourselves a little bit more about the process and how we finance the city. A couple of things have come to mind, just observations from people as you go in and about the city. One would be the selection of the new fire hall site at the previous Northcrest Arena. I'm just wondering if there's anybody that can give us an update. I know the demolition it's either done or certainly underway. What the timeline might be for people seeing that new fire hall going up. And then the other question I had to staff would be, as the city grows, and we had a big debate on Monday evening about the growth of the city, particularly in the East Side Transportation Study, and perhaps the requirement or need for a fourth fire hall or an additional fire hall, maybe in Ashburnham. And we're consulting with Ashburnham specifically tonight. I'm wondering if we could get an update on those two things from a member of staff. Thank you.
Councillor, I'm going to defer that to my colleague, Ms. Poplinski. She's on the call here this evening, and I'm going to defer that question to her. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Baldwin, for that question. The North End Fire Station site has been selected, as you know, and the construction is slated to begin late summer of 2022. And then, as for your question about another fire station, Fire Station 4 is projected in the future annual capital budget, weighing budget priorities and this progress of the scheduled development within the city. So we don't have an exact timeline for that, but it is definitely on staff's radar.
Thanks for that. And Mr. Chair, may I ask another question? It's not really related, it's to the fire hall, but I appreciate Yvette, you giving us the update there. It's the term we hear all the time, growth pays for growth. And people sometimes ask about that. I'm just wondering if yourself, Yvette, or Richard could just talk to that little cliche, growth pays for growth, or we want it to pay for growth. Can someone speak to that, the development charges and things like that?
Yeah, sure. I can respond to that. The term, so with respect to development charges, they're a rate that's set through a lot of consultation with specialists and within the regulations that are in place for the city. And so those are charges that we ask developers to pay when they plan construction for a new building or subdivision, etc. And the fees are approximating the cost of what that new building or residence would have paid to join the services that are existing within the city. So it's to approximate the cost of joining, like the cost of adding that new structure to the city, services for water, sewer, sidewalks, lighting, all of that kind of stuff. And so the growth pays for growth is that this growth of the new buildings, new residents, they're paying for the cost of adding on to all of the existing services so that everyone can still have so that they can participate in all the existing services to the same level that current residents and businesses have.
That's a really good explanation, and better than the one that I provided to my neighbor this morning. So thank you for that, Yvette. It's an interesting concept, but they'd heard the word, growth pays for growth, and it's to provide kind of a complete community, and the developers are charged an amount of money so that the new neighborhoods look like kind of the ones that you and I live in, for example.
Exactly.
The only other question I had, Councillor Reel, right off the bat, is I'm just wondering, you know, we've come through, you know, 2.5 years of COVID, and you know, sometimes I think we're personally relieving some of those restrictions too soon. The masking, for example, I know the province has said you don't need to wear a mask, but on the other hand, we have our medical officer of health who is suggesting, and very much so, that we continue with the masking. And I know a lot of people in the community have been hurting financially, and we've had some good support from the provincial government with respect to finances coming back to the city. I'm just wondering where we stand with respect to, you know, the balance sheet, the impacts of COVID, and how we've managed to navigate those 2.5 years, and how that may impact the 2023 budget. So it's a long question, but I tried to set the stage there. I'm wondering if Yvette or maybe Richard could give us a bit of a forecast as to how we've come through a very difficult time.
Sure, I can answer that. So we were fortunate throughout 2020, 2021, and even a little bit now at the beginning of 2022 to qualify for provincial funding related to COVID costs. So we were able to sort of break even, if so to speak, in terms of what revenues were impacted and additional costs were incurred. They were all funded by the province, with the exception of the casino funding, the revenue sharing from the casino that we would have received. But the way that we receive that revenue, we plan for it to go into a reserve and then to be used for a future capital project. So the in-year loss of that revenue didn't impact us for 2020 and 2021. It will just, we won't have those funds in reserve available for future capital projects as soon as we had expected, because we missed out on a couple of years effectively of casino funding. And then now going forward into 2023, we're not anticipating that COVID will impact the budget at all at this point. I mean, things may change throughout 2022 that we can't see at this moment, but things are opening up, and we don't expect to incur any additional costs as we have all of the physical barriers and those kinds of things in place at city facilities. So there shouldn't be, by the time 2023 begins, there shouldn't be any impact on the budget at all. We expect revenues for facilities like the museums and art galleries and, you know, summer camps and all of that kind of thing will be back to ideally pre-COVID levels, but definitely not what we saw in 2020 or 2021.
So light at the end of the tunnel that's trending in a positive direction.
Yes, yeah. Assuming everything with COVID stays as it's looking right now. No
That's
unexpected
good.
changes.
Thanks a lot, Yvette. Appreciate your answers. Back to you, Councillor.
I have a question for Richard again, and this has to do with the budget process, and certainly what we're doing tonight, and certainly the meetings that we're having all through the month of April with each ward, setting that arbitrated number. And I think in the budget meetings this year, you talked about what actually the number should be to do the things that the city needs to do to move it forward. And that's not putting you on the spot but I think that it was I think it was a very interesting conversation that you presented to council, or a reality check about exactly what the numbers should be to do things that people want us to do, or what needs to be done. Any comments on that, Richard?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if I could totally answer that question or not. I mean, I know what it costs to run the city. I know what you know, the demands for services that we have in the community, and you know, typically those costs aren't getting any cheaper, and the demands aren't going away. You know, I think to your point, it's balancing. You know, it's balancing the needs in the community, sometimes the wants in the community, but trying to find that balance with what is, you know, what is the taxpayer, able to pay, I think becomes the challenge. And certainly as we're going forward, in considering what we're doing for, we'll be contemplating for the 2023 budget, we'll be trying to, maximizing our capital program. We'll try and maximize the revenues and so on to keep that impact to the taxpayer as low as possible. I know that when I see what's happening, inflationary pressures out there, and I alluded to a couple of them in the presentation. We're going to have our hands full for sure, and the capital infrastructure needs aren't going away. So however, I'm not sure, this evening, Mr. Chairman, if I could give you a specific number. Certainly we'll be working hard to bring back something that hopefully as a finance committee, when we get to that point, that we can say what are the needs, what are the impacts that we're seeing, but yet what is the responsible thing that we're going to ask the taxpayer for, and hopefully we'll be able to find a number that satisfies everyone.
I think I will rephrase the question. It certainly wasn't to put you on the spot to give a number. I just know that we were in the debate the last time for the 2022 budget. You had said, ever mindful of what happened with COVID business, people suffering through COVID, and finding that comfortability or that number to move the city forward. You said really actually, and we landed on 2.87, but you said really, if you wanted to do all the things that people want us to do, or to even do part of the needs of the infrastructure of the city of Peterborough that keep growing. I'm going to use a number of $1 billion. It would have to be a number at such that was way higher than what we settled on to really make a dent in the infrastructure number of $1 billion.
Yeah, for sure. And absolutely. I mean, I do recall the conversation, Councillor, and certainly, the amount, if we were trying to do everything that was being asked and providing for the financing that we need, certainly it would have been significantly more than 2.87%. But we work with what we can and what we have available, and we try and stretch that as far as we can.
I think Councillor Baldwin has his hand up.
This is my last question tonight, Mr. Chair. I am cognizant of the time and appreciate staff working overtime from their regular day to join us this evening. Richard, we just passed in principle a transportation master plan that projected costs and projected things out over the next 30 years. And I can recall back in 2014 when I was first elected, there was a discussion about redoing Brayley Drive. And the discussion at the time, it might have been just the council before I was elected, but they were discussing whether to make Brayley Drive 2 lanes or 4 lanes. And the appetite at council at that time was that would be 20 years out. In other words, the planners had suggested Brayley Drive wouldn't require 4 lanes for another 20 years. And so they did the complete street and they made it a 2-lane road. So the question I have now, and a couple of people have said this to me, for example, one of the things on the East Side Transportation Study was to start with some low-hanging fruit, if you will. We could improve the light synchronization, move traffic. We could maybe change the intersection slightly by having a couple of right-hand turn lanes, as opposed to something like the potential possibility of a roundabout at Television Road and Park Hill Road. So the question that was posed to me in that kind of scenario was, try the little fixes first to get traffic moving, because the expense isn't as great on a year-to-year basis. as opposed to that potential roundabout that would have a significant cost of capital to do that. But then someone else said around the coffee table, why wouldn't you do the most expensive piece first, like the roundabout, for example, and spend the money in 2023 dollars, as opposed to waiting 20 years when with inflation and the way costs are going, it might maybe 5 or 6 times more expensive 20 years out. So I know you don't have a crystal ball, and there is an ability for the taxpayer to pay. We understand that. But from a fear of, it was an interesting discussion about, should you pay your most expensive things now to get that out of the way, or just chip away at things as you go? And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I think it really comes down to the appetite for the taxpayers and the councils of the day, to set a rate that's reasonable, that people can live with, if you will. I just thought I'd share that conversation because I kind of found it fascinating. I couldn't come up with the right answer, but it was a really good dialogue amongst a couple of people.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting conversation, and certainly to your point, there is a couple of different veins of thought there. Should we be moving forward with that that more significant major infrastructure sooner rather than later, and get that in current dollars versus some inflationary cost down the road? For there is certainly a conversation to be had there. I think part of the answer is that those significant works that, and you used the example of the roundabout, I suspect that will require further study. And I suspect that we will need to do some further legwork in terms of ensuring that is the right solution, and what will the benefit be to that, when those capital works are done. In the meantime, while we're doing that due diligence, we can move forward with some other smaller improvements into the road network system that will themselves, and maybe doing many of those smaller projects that will themselves have, albeit smaller, benefits. They might help inform and shape what is that more significant cost. And so when we get to that point of having that more substantial investment, well, it might look a little different. We might realize that through other efficiencies that we have done, other investments, smaller investments that we made, maybe that much larger one that we thought we might make might look a little bit differently. So, I mean, I'm not sure, to your point, I'm not sure that there's it's not always a one size fits all approach there. I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of considerations there, and obviously balancing of priorities. And, but part of it is, can we move forward now, and what additional work do we need to do in terms of studies or other environmental assessment work, to make sure that we've done our due diligence to do that bigger, more significant project. So I think lots of considerations there.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent answer, Richard, and thank you very much for that. You made some really strong points, so thank you. Mr. Chair, those are all the questions I can think of right now for our staff, but thank you very much for staff for joining myself and Councillor Real this evening. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
I have a final question for Richard, and certainly for the ones that are going to run again for the next council, certainly, and new ones that might be running. One of the questions that are posed at the door is property tax fatigue, or the property tax increase. And I don't know if you would agree with it or not. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Richard, but I tell them a down and dirty way is to reduce services. And when you reduce services, you lay people off. And the world that I come from, when the company wanted to balance their books, they laid people off. So I kind of a multifaceted question, I think, is the one is the property tax fatigue, or what people are saying, their property taxes. And one of the comments, certainly with a senior cohort of people, you're taxing me out of my home. And secondly, how would you, and my comments were reducing services to drive that number down, but also keeping the service levels where they are, and what the expectation for the taxpayers are for the services that we provide. So I know that's kind of a multifaceted question, but Is that something that you and your department grapple with?
Absolutely. And Councillor, I think back, and I believe it was the 2021 budget. We went through an exercise actually where we reviewed all of the services that the city provides, you know, through the lens of, is it a legislated mandated service? You know, is it a you know, a nice to have, you know, or traditional, you know, service? Is it a nice to have, or is it simply you know, a desire in the community? Is it a discretionary service? And I think it was a bit of an eye opener, not only for us as we went down through the myriad of services that the city does provide, but an overwhelming majority of services that the city provides are you know, kind of fall into that legislative mandated, you know, category, or traditional services that it would be unreasonable for the, you know, the private sector to provide. So once you get past those two, you've gone through the lion's share of the budget. And when you get down to, you know, what is the discretionary end of the scale, it's a much smaller part. And so you're absolutely right. You know, if you want to, you know, really drive down the taxes, well, absolutely, services are, you know, reducing services is a way to do it, but that, you know, that comes at sometimes at other costs to the community, and sometimes it's those services that make our community a great place to live. So, you know, it's trying to balance all those the wants and needs and the ability to pay there. So.
Thank you for that answer, Richard. I don't have any other questions. Looking here in the chat, I don't see anybody with their hand up wanting to ask a question. Just a comment, I see some good news today that we could have our first business at Green Tech Common. And I think that's great news. And I think one of the participants tonight is a vice president of corporate services and that and communications at Trent University. And certainly that's great news because it was a major investment, not only with Trent University, but the city to get that that facility and certainly the infrastructure that was put in place. So I think that's great news today, certainly of our first business that's hoping to set up shop there and employment. So I'll turn it back to Brendan. I don't know if there's anybody that has on the telephone or that's participating in person here who would like to. Go ahead, Brendan.
I don't see any, Councillor Riel, so one last ask, and then we'll throw it back to you one more time for a quick thank you and wrap up. And it's fantastic. We'll be posting this video after the meeting.
I see a thank you. So, and again, closing remarks. Thank you for joining us today. The recording of the presentation will be posted on the budget's engagement page at connectpeterborough.ca/2023 budget for people to watch when it's convenient for them. We have 4 more of these informal meetings are scheduled over the next 4 weeks. The next one will be Autonomy Ward, Thursday, April 7th at 6 o'clock. The formal public meetings for the 2023 budget guidelines will be on June the 22nd before council considers setting the guidelines for a draft and the recommendation of the 2023 budget. This is just the start of the 2023 budget process. The draft budget is expected to be released for the public viewing on December the 5th, 2022, with more public meetings in January 2023 before council considers approving the plan in late January 2023. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and certainly questions were raised, and certainly with that, if you haven't already done so, please fill out the budget survey at connectpeterborough.ca/2023 budget. And with that, thank you and good night.
Good night, everyone.